Amos 6 verse 13. I better turn this on. Amos 6:13. Ye which rejoice in a thing of naught, which say, have we not taken us horns by our own strength? Okay, so God's mad at Israel. Of course, we've been seeing this nonstop through the book. He's saying here, the problem with you is you're rejoicing in something that is nothing. And then he's going to reveal what that nothing is. Here's what they think is something, but he says it's nothing. They're boasting. Have we not taken us horns by our own strength? Okay, so what's a horn? Horn can have two definitions in the Bible. Some people will give you one or the other. I'm going to give you both. And it's important to have both. If the Bible gives you two definitions for something, grab both of them, because you'll need them at some point. Of course, the context is going to clear up whatever it is he's talking about, and you'll know how to fit the definition. Horn is sometimes in the Bible a symbol of your voice. The horn. In Psalm chapter 75, verse 4, he says this, and I said unto the fools, deal not foolishly, and to the wicked, lift not up the horn, that is your voice, lift up not your horn on high, speak not with a stiff neck. Okay, there he told you it's talking about somebody speaking, and he referred to it as a horn twice. In verse 10, the same passage, Psalm 75:10, all the horns of the wicked also will I cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be exalted. Now, there it could have a different definition. It could have the definition, the other definition for a horn is power. Like national power or might. But here, obviously, it's going to be the voice too that's cut off. When everybody gets to heaven, he says at some point every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that he's Lord to the glory of God the Father. Okay, so there, what they were willing to do with their tongue, he's going to change. Suddenly they're going to be willing to use it correctly. Okay, so in a sense it could be either or both. Psalms 148 verse 14. He also exalteth the horn of his people. Now, this has got to be the voice, because it goes on and says, the praise of all his saints, even of the children of Israel, a people near unto him, praise ye the Lord. So there it's a vocalization again. Are we ringing? Something ringing? You hearing a little ring? Let me move that back some to it, see if that fixes it. 1 Corinthians 13. This is a passage we all know. This kind of will explain to you how this symbolic language is used. When the Bible uses a symbolic language, he'll usually say like or as, or it'll be so obvious you can't take it another way. I'm going to adjust this. Okay, let's see if that does any difference. Okay, 1 Corinthians 13:1. He says, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels. You understand what that is? Language, voice. Okay. And have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. It didn't mean he turned into a cymbal. It means the sound that comes out is just like a cymbal. It's just noise. Okay, so we understand the symbolic language. Same is used with that horn. Now, the other times that the word horn is used, it's used in reference to power or might. In Psalms 18 verse 2, it says, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God. Okay, that's all strong stuff, powerful stuff. My strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation, my high tower. Okay, so their horn obviously is in the list of things that are mighty and powerful. Jeremiah 48:25, he says, the horn of Moab is cut off, and his arm is broken, saith the Lord. Moab there is referring to a nation. A nation doesn't have arms and legs. So their strength, their power, and arms would be the reach that they have. Psalm 75:10, I saw that, we've covered that one before. That could be either, and probably is both. Both the horn as a voice or the horn as power. He said, all the horns of the wicked shall be cut off, both their power and their voice. I'm not going to listen to that mess anymore. That'd be a great day. In our passage in Amos, Israel is bragging about their own power. And you'll see that in the next verse. It's a reference to their own strength. In 2 Corinthians 10, 2 Corinthians 10, verse 12. The problem with bragging is there's always somebody better. Why do you want to enter that race? You know. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 12. It goes both ways, though. People don't just brag about being good, they brag about being bad, too. And there's always something worse. You can always be outdone. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 12. For we dare not make ourselves of the number or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves. But they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise. That's just not a good thing to do. Okay, so the horns in our passage really is talking about something much bigger than just human ability and strength. Because the comparison is God. So it's God versus not just a man, but satanic power. It's deity versus demonic. There is a demonic force on this earth. And it's both physical. I mean, they can do some physically weird stuff that's superhuman. And it's also military, like China. I mean, and I'm sure the Muslims are involved in some unholy militarily junk. And then, of course, religious. We know that the religious power out there is demonic. And that would be, in my book, number one would be the Roman Catholic. I mean, but it's not just Roman Catholic. I would say you could mark it real quick by noticing those that love death. Okay, is anybody promoting abortion? Okay, if they promote abortion, it's just a small step to go to serve the Prince of Death. And then this thing is going to come to full fruition when the Antichrist shows up. And he's going to be leading all of those areas. Let's find out where it began. Genesis chapter 3. Genesis 3, verse 1. I'm going to go on a rabbit trail here, but it's in the passage, so we'll just follow the passage. There's a difference in preaching and teaching. Preaching, I wouldn't run all of these rabbit trails. I would just give you points. But teaching, I just cover everything that's there, so you get a hodgepodge of everything. Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? This is some kind of a wild animal, isn't it? A serpent that's speaking? That's a crazy creature. Look down at verse 14, chapter 3, 14. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above what? All cattle. Do you consider a reptile a cattle? That was the classification he was in. The serpent was in the classification of a cattle. And above every beast of the field, upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust thou shalt eat all the days of thy life. Okay, so this serpent is the beast of the field. Now, he obviously did not show up 100% like a snake. He probably showed up like his angelic body was. Originally, he had probably the reptile classification. And you know the cherubim have 4 faces. One of them is an ox. So that would be the cattle. So that's why he's cursed above cattle. Let's find some more info on him. 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11, verse 12. Second Corinthians 11:12. But what I do, that I will do, that I may cut off occasion from them which desire occasion, that wherein they glory they may be found even as we. For such, I lost my place. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers. Obviously, this is more than probably just human, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. That's, I don't know what to call them. They've got some kind of shapeshifter is the name they use. You can change forms. That's what the devil does. And so look for it. On the comics and all that junk, they're going to start making good guys shapeshifters. Because the next one that shows up is really the king of the shape-shifting. Revelation 12. Revelation 12, verse 9. We get more description of this serpent. Revelation 12:9. Early on in Genesis, we saw the serpent was not just some sort of a snake. He was in the classification of cattle. Here, Revelation 12:9. And the great dragon was cast out. So, whatever a dragon is, that's what he looks like. A dragon. And, he goes on, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Okay, so he's got some buddies up there, probably that can do the same thing he does. That's what Paul was alluding to. No marvel that these people are turning into the shape shift of an apostle when they're really faking it, because Satan transforms too. This serpent is not really a snake. He's called a serpent. A serpent is poisonous. A snake could be benign. Not in my book. In my book, if it wiggles on the ground, you either put it on your hook or you chop its head off. His animal counterpart. This was a glorious being that God had created originally. His counterpart on earth was what we would call a reptile. And that got cursed. Satan was a cherub to begin with, until he decided that he wanted to be even more than that. Ezekiel 1. Ezekiel 1 verse 5. Ezekiel 1:5. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures. Don't you like, I like it when the Bible is not real specific. When it's just 4 living things that were moving. If he put more flowery language in there, we might misunderstand what he was saying. I don't know exactly what it was. They were living, but there was 4 of them. 4 living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had 4 faces. That's like some men I know. And everyone had 4 wings. And their feet were straight feet. So that'd be like a horse, a straight hoof, straight feet. And the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. So it's split. Or like a deer. It has 2, it's a hoof, but it comes in 2 pieces. That's why they call the devil old split foot. He's got that foot. The sole of the feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. Okay, I wonder why they've got this brass look. I think the reason they have this brass, but I can't go too deep tonight because I got too many verses already. I think the reason they have this brass look is because in Revelation he tells you about Jesus' appearance. And it said that his feet and his legs looked like looked like burnished brass, as though he was standing in fire or something. And this is wild, and I'll just tell it to you. You can do whatever you want to with it. I think that in the universe, in the middle of the earth is hell. Below hell, below the universe, the bottom of the universe, I say, is the lake of fire. And the universe is the clothing that God wears. One day he's going to fold that up like a vesture. Okay, he's wearing this universe, and he's standing on the lake of fire. And that makes his legs look like burnished brass. And that's, you'll find in Ezekiel 28 that Lucifer was allowed to walk up and down in the stones of fire, probably the lake of fire. Now, the lake of fire, it doesn't say in Revelation that he creates the lake of fire and then throws hell in it. No, he just simply throws hell into the lake of fire. I think the lake of fire is created who knows where and when, but I think it's down below us somewhere. Okay, moving on. Ezekiel 10. Ezekiel 10, verse 14. Here's these cherubim again. And every one had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub. Okay, you can do the correlation there and you find out that's an ox. The second face was the face of a man. The third face of a lion. The fourth face was of an eagle. Okay, so we've got all the animals covered except for one, which would have been the reptile, and that was probably Lucifer, who was the head cherub, the anointed cherub that covereth. Ezekiel 28, verse 12. Ezekiel 28:12. Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum. That is, you are everything there is. The sum. That's when you're doing addition, it's called, each line is called an add-in. So you're going to add that in, and you're going to add that in, and at the bottom of it you get a sum. He's the total. He's everything. Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. That's Lucifer, or was Lucifer. Verse 14. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mount of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. There's those stones of fire. That's Lucifer before he became a fallen angel, before he became Satan. So probably when he shows up in the garden, he's showing up in the garb that he knows will appeal. And it's reptilian, it's serpent-like. Look at Revelation 4. Revelation 4, verse 7. We've seen the cherub, we've seen the animals they represent. Now let's go to an end-time revelation of heaven. Revelation 4:7. And the first beast was like a lion. This is something in heaven. And the second beast was like a calf, so like an ox. And the third beast had the face of a man. And the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. The same description of a cherubim. However, even there we notice there's no reptile class, because that one God got rid of. And he's going to get rid of him eternally here before long. Ezekiel 32. Ezekiel 32. This creature that showed up to Eve in the garden is something that, well, of course it's Satan, so it's satanic, but it's something that has promoted worship. All through the ages, they've made a god out of this thing, and an image like this. That's the Baal worship, the bull. Now you'll find, I believe it's in India, there is a horned serpent. There's a serpent that has horns on it, a snake. And it's like this right here, Ezekiel 32:1. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mountain, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron, and said unto him, Up, make us gods. Where did I tell you? Did I tell you Ezekiel? It's Exodus 32. Yeah. Exodus 32:1. Exodus 32:1. Big difference. Up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. Okay, notice some things in that. Who brought them out of Egypt? Out of their own mouth, it was Moses. And they said, we don't know what happened to him. He brought us out of Egypt and just dumped us here and left us. We don't know. Okay, so they know who brought them out. It was Moses. But they forget it real quick. Chapter 32, verse 4. Aaron's doing this. And he received them at their hand, all their earrings and their trinkets, and fashioned it with a graving tool after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. I thought it was Moses. They've self-deluded. Okay, but they made them a calf. This image, this same figure that is in a cherub. That's what the cherub's face is. And we saw that the serpent was cursed above the cattle. Hosea chapter 13. Hosea 13 verse 2. When you get into a pagan country, they worship all kinds of things as gods. In India, the cows, you've heard the phrase, holy cow? That comes from somewhere. They think in India that the cow is sacred, but it came from somewhere way before that. That's what Aaron thought. Holy cow, this is your God. Hosea 13:2. And now they sin more and more, and have made them molten images of their silver, and idols according to their own understanding. All of the work of the craftsmen, they say of them, let the men that sacrifice kiss the calves. There's that animal again that they like, the cow. And probably a bull, because you find in Psalms that it's a bull of Bashan. 1 Kings 18. 1 Kings 18:17. Here's where it became mainline in Israel. 1 Kings 18:17. Elijah has turned off the faucet for 3.5 years, and he shows up, and Ahab is not happy to see him. Verse 17. And it came to pass, when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? No, I've been out of town. If there's any trouble going on, it's got to be you. You're the one in charge. It's got to be you. Verse 18. And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and hast followed Balaam. Okay, so the house of Ahab, that's what brought in this Baal worship. You'll remember that his wife, Jezebel, had prophets of Baal. Okay, that's that bull worship. Now she had something else. People ignore this. There's 400, how many prophets? Well, I already told you. There's 400 prophets of Baal. But that's not it. There's also 430 prophets of the grove. There's 2 sets of prophets. You either follow God or you follow anything that comes along. The people that worship other gods are not content to simply worship the other god. They've got to diversify infinitum, like India, a house of gods, like you find in, is that Judges 18? 1 Kings 18, verse 40. First Kings 18:40. And Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, and let not one of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon, and slew them there. Woo-wee! Now, that seems harsh, but they knew what they were doing. Obviously, they're in Israel, so they know the God of Israel. They're not ignorant of that. They've chosen. And God gives everybody a chance to repent. He's not just being mean. They've chosen. Once you make your choice, God knows what the final choice is. I don't know when that is. But maybe the person and God for sure knows when I've given you enough. Enough chances, it's over. And here he lowers the boom with a death penalty. He's going to do it again in Revelation, but right now let's go to chapter 19. 1 Kings 19. 1 Kings 19, verse 2. All of this is satanic. I keep stressing that because satanic things have an effect. They're higher than physical things. We're set a little lower than the angels. So the spirit realm is higher than human. We know that. They're stronger. But they also have emotional strength that's more than ours. So you've got to be lining up behind the right spiritual leader, or you're a nothing. You get stepped on. 1 Kings 19:2. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. He should have just said, what prophets? They're all dead. I killed them. Come on. What you got? But that's not what he did. There's some satanic power here. Verse 3. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongeth unto Judah, and left his servant there. He was scared to death. Now, obviously, he is a good example of humans. We can walk in the Spirit one moment and then turn around and be following the wrong spirit and not have enough faith. Okay, that's just normal. That's what we're going to go through. Snap out of it. And here, he was a great man. I mean, nobody else does this. He was so great, God's going to bring him back for an encore in the tribulation. He's not doing that for me. Okay, well, I should never fail, but if it happens, okay, I'm in good company. But that doesn't mean be content with failure. Get back up and move on. Back to Amos, Amos chapter 6. Amos 6, we've covered this verse, but now in light of the facts that we've gotten so far, let's look at it again. Amos 6, verse 12. Shall horses. Now what do we know about a horse? We saw that the devil had straight, or a cherub had straight feet. Okay, so that's like a horse. Shall horses run upon the rock? Okay, who's the rock? Jesus Christ. Their rock is not as our rock. Okay. Shall the devil run on Jesus Christ? I doubt it. Will one plow there with oxen? Okay, that's the face of a cherub. For ye have turned judgment into gall, and the fruit of righteousness into hemlock. Okay, all of that is very pictorial and specific, comparing righteousness versus demonic things. Hosea 10. Hosea 10, verse 4. They have spoken words swearing falsely in making a covenant. This making a covenant comes up several times. He says in another place that your covenant with death will not stand. Okay, he talks about the Antichrist shows up and makes a covenant, and in the midst of the week he breaks it. Okay, that's the 7 years. In the middle of it, he's going to break it, and he's going to stand up and say, no, you got to come worship me. I am God. So that's that covenant thing. Make a covenant. Thus judgment springeth up as hemlock. There it is again. In the furrows of the field. So planning, he's saying that Israel was supposed to be his garden. God loves gardens. That's how he started the book of in the Bible. We start off learning about a garden of Eden. I don't have time to take you through it. I probably shouldn't even mention it, but I'm going to do it anyway. The original earth was not called earth. It doesn't get that name until later on in Genesis, not even at the beginning. The beginning of Genesis, in the beginning God created the heaven and earth. Earth is lowercase, not capital. It doesn't get named earth until later on in the passage when it appears in a capital. Prior to that, in Ezekiel, the globe we're on, if it's a globe, was called Eden. And I don't have time to run all the reference, but you can file that away somewhere and notice it when you go through there. Okay, so Israel as a nation has done something. They've done some impossible things. Of course, they thought they were powerful. They were a nothing to begin with. And obviously, that's what God likes to do. He likes to take the impossible and work through that, so that people will see him, not the impossible. For instance, when he was breaking the bread for the 5,000, gave them food out of nothing, out of thin air. Well, then they came back the next day and they said, hey, our fathers in the wilderness got manna. What can you do for us? Well, what do you think he just did yesterday? They didn't see him. They suddenly looked at the impossible as though that became God. And now that's what they're worshiping. That's what Israel had done. God had made Israel powerful. And Israel viewed it as a mirror. Look how powerful I am. No, God's saying, look what's behind you. This is how you were able to do it. And they've not looked there. They turned judgment, common sense, into gall. And the fruit of righteousness into hemlock. They, instead of bringing forth fruit, like you would expect something you planted to bring forth fruit, it just popped up weeds. Now, the young people would like that nowadays, but Job chapter 41. Job 41:24. Job 41:24. It says, his heart is firm as a stone, yea, as hard as a piece of a nether millstone. He says, these people have hardened their heart to such a degree that it's like a stone. Now, that's bad news. The thing in Romans 9, where he says, God will harden who he'll harden, and he'll have mercy on whom he'll have mercy. God is the, what do you call it? If you have epoxy, you have a two-part epoxy. One is I don't know what those two parts are called. One of them is a hardening agent. God is the hardening agent. If you hadn't already become the glue, when he was added to you, you wouldn't become hard. You would become soft. He's a, I can't think of the word that thing is called. And I don't know, an additive that makes the compound work. And for them, Pharaoh had already hardened himself over and over. So when God was added, it's an elixir that speeds things up. And he sped it up. That's what Israel has done. Israel has become hard. You can see that in Christians' lives. For some reason, when a Christian gets involved in wickedness, they do it to a bigger degree than the lost world. God is a hardening agent. He speeds up. When you turn toward God, you turn with a greater degree than the world could understand. But when you turn from him, it's the same. You turn faster than they do too. Matthew chapter 13. Matthew 13, verse 20. Matthew 13, 20. This is the sower and the seed, so he's going to tell us about ground and plowing it up and planting in the stony ground. Matthew 13, 20. But he that received the seed into stony places, the same as he that heareth the word, and anon. You can find the parallel passage, anon means immediately. And anon with joy receiveth it, yet hath not root in himself, but dureth for a while. Now, God had already said this was Israel. Woo. Those Israelites, if they were putting two and two together, would have figured out, hey, he's talking about us. And he said he's the seed, and we're just receiving it because we like the bread, and then we go away until there's another need for a mealtime. And then we come back and want to hear him do a miracle. For when tribulation or persecution ariseth because of the word. That's weird. Not because of the tribulation or because of the persecution, because of the word. They blame it on something. And you'll be amazed. God gets the blame for things he should never be blamed for. That's what's going on here. Persecution arises and tribulation. Rather than turning around and saying, that's the devil, like it is, they say, no, how dare God? By and by, he's offended. That's America. No, that's the world, I'm sure. Offended. Mark 4, verse 20. Mark 4, verse 20. Your heart can become stony. We don't want it to be stony. We want it to stay soft. Mark 4:20. And these are they which are sown on good ground, such as hear the word and receive it and bring forth fruit. Some 30-fold, some 60-fold, some 100-fold. Okay, so what happens if you find I'm thinking of too many cross-references tonight. I'm going to give you another one anyway. I believe it's, I can't think of one of the Gospels there. He says, they're out in the troubled sea, and he says, don't you remember the miracle of the loaves and the fishes? And they didn't remember that, and he says, because their heart was hardened. Well, the troubled sea didn't have anything to do with getting a buffet. But he said, if you couldn't remember, I could give you a spread of food, then your heart is hard and you won't trust me to calm the storm. So that heart has to do with faith. Look at it in Hosea 10. Hosea 10, verse 12. Hosea 10:12. He says, sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy. That's a great formula. If you want mercy, if you're in need of mercy, there's a formula in the Bible for it. He says, sow to yourselves in righteousness. So pursue righteousness. It ends up with you getting mercy. Break up your fallow ground. That is, your heart's hard. Well, how do you, a field that's hard, you got to go out there with the plow and break it up. Chop it up. Okay, sometimes our hearts get that way. Make it soft again. Because it's impossible for you to sow anything on it if it's hard as a stone. So you got to break it up first, then sow some righteousness. The end result will be a harvest of mercy. I'll take that. Break up your fallow ground. Seek the Lord till he come and rain righteousness upon you. Okay, back to Amos. We've got one verse left in this chapter. Let's see if we can finish. Somebody's laughing at me. Amos 6, verse 14. But behold, I will raise up against you a nation, O house of Israel, saith the Lord, the God of hosts, and they shall afflict you from the entering of Hamath unto the river of the wilderness. Okay, he's promised them here, I'm going to destroy you by another nation. He could have done it anyway. He could have just snapped his fingers and they'd be gone. But he says, I'm going to use your enemies to come in and defeat you. Exodus 7. Exodus 7 verse 3. Pharaoh is a bad guy. We know that. You'll find Pharaoh becomes a type of the Antichrist, or the devil, Satan. He's used all through the Bible. From hundreds of years after he was dead, in Ezekiel, they're still calling out Pharaoh. Okay, even though he doesn't exist anymore. So something beyond that. He'd given himself over to work for the devil, obviously. Exodus 7 verse 3. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. Now, in context with what we've seen in our passage, God's saying in Amos, I've been your God. I've been your protector and your provider. I've done things for you that you couldn't have done on your own. And other people looking suddenly worship you and think you're great, but it's not you, it's me. Okay, so this is what he's doing to Pharaoh. He's making Pharaoh great. So just because God's blessing doesn't mean he's always going to bless. If you don't reciprocate the praise and the thanks for it to him, he'll destroy you. Look down at verse 13. And he hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said. And the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuseth to let the people go. Now, this is not God hardening him beyond his ability. This is God giving him what Pharaoh has already been practicing. But it says right there, he refuseth to let the people go. He could have let them go. And he's the one who refused that. Pharaoh reacts the same way Israel did to God, the same way the world who's in love with the devil reacts when they hear truth. They react in opposition, but it's not just I don't agree with you. It's I'm going to destroy you because you have something else to say than what I'm saying. The world preaches tolerance, but they're not going to be tolerant of anybody who is spiritually correct. They'll have tolerance for any sin, but they're not going to have any tolerance for any righteousness. They don't practice what they preach. Look at Acts 4:17. Acts 4:17. Here's how the world, who's loving sin, reacts when righteousness shows up. The preacher starts preaching. I was at Drowsy Poet this morning, and somebody for the umpteenth time told me they were going to come to church. And they said, now you're not one of those yeller and screamer preachers, are you? He said, I can't stand those preachers that bang on the desk and say, you're going to hell, you're going... It's like, well, I try to stay true to my personality. If you yell at a ball game, you should yell behind the pulpit. If I went to a ball game, which I really don't even care about ball games, but if I went to a ball game, you wouldn't know I was there. I don't yell and scream. So I don't do that here either. I said, but if you go to a ball game and you yell and scream, you better do that behind the pulpit too. So don't knock it just because you don't like it. Here's what the world does. Acts 4, verse 17. But that it spread no further among the people, let us straitly threaten them, that they speak henceforth to no man in this name. Could you imagine that? a name, somebody's name, hurts their feelings so bad they're going to threaten somebody? There's a name that offends me, and I don't threaten anybody when they do it. They use Jesus' name quite often in vain, and Christians don't threaten them for that. But yet here, they threaten us when we preach righteousness. The tables are not equal. Look up back a chapter, Acts 3 verse 1. Here's what stirred them all up. You'll be amazed what made them so mad. Acts 3:1. Now Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. And a certain man lame from his mother's womb. Okay, so there's a lame guy here. You know what happens? They end up healing him. And they let him know it's the power of God, Jesus Christ, that does this. And they got mad about that. That was why they were threatening. Because somebody got healed. A lame man can now walk, and you're mad about that? They don't have compassion. They've got agendas is what they got. Look at, I've got too many verses here. Let's skip through some of this. 1 Kings 8. 1 Kings 8, verse 65. In Amos, he told them the directions, there some longitude and latitude that they could plot on the map. He said in Amos, they shall afflict you from the entering in of Hamath to the river of Egypt. Okay, so we're going to find this entering in of Hamath. In Amos, it's spelled differently than you'll find it in the other places it's in the Bible. In Amos, it's spelled Hemath. The other places it's spelled Hamath, Hamath, or Hemath. You'll find this throughout the Bible. The spelling is not consistent. We didn't have consistent spelling rules until about probably in the 1800s. Because even after the King James, you'll find, in fact, I was going through it, the King James has many revisions. They didn't change the text, it changed the spellings. It changed the font that was used. And so our spelling is changed based on phonetics. People used to spell based on how it sounded in their ear. And so that's why the spellings sometimes are different. But you'll notice it's the same place. 1 Kings 8, verse 65. And at that time Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him, a great congregation, from the entering of Hamath unto the river of Egypt, before the Lord our God, 7 days and 7 days, even 14 days. Why didn't just say 14 days to begin with? 7 days and 7 days? I mean 14 days. So here, this is a boundary. What are the boundary lines for the nation of Israel? The nation itself thinks it's this. What does the nation of Israel think it? They think it's from Dan to Beersheba, although they don't know where those places are. Balfour Declaration, they declared Israel's boundaries is from Dan to Beersheba. We don't know where Dan or Beersheba is. That's what they said. Look at it again, 1 Kings 14. God's going to tell them, I'll get to it in a second, God's going to tell them the boundary of Israel is actually just below Syria. It's this Hamath here. 1 Kings 14:25. He restored the coast of Israel. Okay, so if he restored it, it once was stored. He restored it. So they had owned this to begin with. And now he's getting it back. They restored the coast of Israel from the entering of Hamath unto the sea of the plain, according to the word of the Lord God of Israel, which he spake by the hand of his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, which was of Gath-hepher. Let me see if it's on my map. It should. Well, I don't see it. It's so small, y'all wouldn't be able to see it anyway, but it's way up there. It's on the coast, though. Syria's over to the north, south, east. Hamath would be west of Syria. I'll give you the coordinates for it in a minute. Here's what Smith's dictionary says, Smith's Bible dictionary. He says, the principal city of Upper Syria was situated in the valley of something, Orontes, O-R-O-N-T-S, that place, which is commanded from the low screen of the hill, which was so forth, so on. All that doesn't mean anything to y'all. The Hamathites were Hamitic. So this is where the son of Noah, Ham, landed. That's where he came down and settled there. And then they spread out from there. Hamitic race are included among the descendants of Canaan in Genesis 10, verse 18. So let's find it in Genesis 10:18. Actually, I meant to do this earlier, but I've been making y'all turn to everything. I keep forgetting y'all don't have a screen that you can just look at. I've got it all written out. Here it is, Genesis 10:18. And the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. Okay, that's one of Ham's descendants. And after were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. Okay, so that's Canaan is considered this Hamath, and that's where Ham settled. It's listed. Now, Smith Dictionary didn't give you this. I put it in here because it should have been in here. Smith didn't know it. Here's where Israel gets it. In Numbers 34, 1 and 2, God says to Moses that Israel's northern border is going to be Hamath. Numbers 34, 1 and 2. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, command the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you're coming to the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall unto you for an inheritance, even the land of Canaan, with this coast thereof. Verse 8. From Mount Hor ye shall point out your border unto the entrance of Hamath, and that the goings forth of the border shall be to Zedad. Okay, so it was the northern section. It was the northernmost region of Israel's border. Nothing of significance happens in Hamath. It's just a plot on the map. It's a no-nothing place until the devil decides to get a foothold there. In 2 Samuel 8, when Toi, king of Hamath, heard that David had smitten all the host of Hadad-ezer. Okay, so he gets trouble from Toi, and he toys with him. Okay, so we get some opposition from Hamath. But it seems like previous to this, it's just been a transit place. People come and go through here. The Hamites came down off the boat, they settled here, and then they kept moving. They moved on throughout all the way down to Africa. The Hamath seems clearly to have been included in the domains of Solomon. We've seen that. He used them for his store cities. He built it in 2 Chronicles. We've seen some of that. In the Assyrian inscriptions, now that's where we're noticing them. This is the time period we're dealing with in the book of Amos, is the Assyrians. In the Assyrian inscriptions of the time of Ahab, Hamath appears as a separate power in alliance with Syria, which would make sense. They're just west of them, of Damascus, and the Hittites, that would be southeast of them, and the Phoenicians, that would be northwest of them. Okay, so they were in a coalition, and an evil coalition, and they joined up with not Syria, Assyria. Assyria did this thing. We've seen this over and over. What they would do was they would come in and either demolish you or you would surrender to them. And then they would use you as a fighting force. And usually they put you on the front line. They let you get killed before their men get killed. And you either fought or you died at home, or you could go die on the battlefield. Take your pick. About 3/4 of a century later, Jeroboam II, this is the time period we're in Amos, recovered Hamath. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam and all that he did and his might, how he warred, and how he recovered Damascus and Hamath, which belonged to Judah, for Israel. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Okay, soon after the Assyrians took it in 2 Kings 18 and 2 Kings 19. And I'll just give you the references, and I'm not going to read all this to you. 2 Kings 18:34, 2 Kings 19:13. That tells you about them taking the land back. From this time it ceased to be a place of any significance. Antiochus Epiphanes changed its name to Ephaniah, Epiphaneia. Why didn't he just use a normal name like John or Bill? Okay, so there's Epiphanes changes it to his own name. It sounds like a derivative of his name. The natives, however, always call it still the same name that it's shown as in the Bible, Hamath. Jerome, I don't call Jerome Saint Jerome, but somebody does here. I guess he's kind to the Catholics. Jerome's time to the present, Hamath is but slightly altered from the ancient time. Okay, so it's still maintained its identity as Hamath. Okay, so that's where God says, I'm going to scatter you. Now, I think it's interesting because that's how he told them when they came into the land. This is what you're going to get. Now he says, I'm going to kick you out, and I'm going to kick you out the same way I started blessing you. They started the blessing from, I'm going to give you all the way from up here, all the way down here. He says, no, I'm going to kick you out all the way up there and all the way down. And that's what he does. All right, that'll do it for tonight, and we'll pick up in Amos chapter 7, just 10 more lessons, and we'll be done with the book.